Hello, welcome you to the second program of Animal Talk. It's
Hello.
Chris and I again, as
Yes.
always. Chris, today you mentioned that you wanted to tackle a very interesting topic.
Very vast.
Very vast
We try to cram it down into 5 little points.
points.
That's right.
Basically, the 5 freedoms, I believe they are called.
Yes.
The 5 freedoms for animals and pets.
That's right.
It's a very controversial subject, shall we say, because are animals free?
True.
Are pets free?
Yes, that's right. That's right. In that respect, it might be a bit controversial, but if we manage to implement these 5 needs appropriately, we can do a lot in sort of restoring those freedoms that we have taken away from them by keeping them as pets or as farm animals.
So technically what we're saying, what we will be discussing today is, in reality, we have removed the freedom of the wild,
Yes.
but through the 5 freedoms that we will be mentioning today, we are trying to create a balance. Because at the end of the day,
We're trying to create an environment that humans and animals can share
okay,
without compromising each other's welfare.
okay. So obviously, even we as humans are not really free.
Sometimes, if any of our viewers have ever had a dog with a behavior problem or a cat with a behavior problem, or a neighbor's animal that could cause them a nuisance, then sometimes animals do limit sometimes our freedom. I can't go abroad whenever I want because of my dog, so it is a balance.
Okay.
It has to be a balance.
So let's look a bit about the 5 freedoms, and I guess what the point is of today's program is that it is important that we try to tick as many of the 5 boxes as possible,
Yes.
so that we ensure that a pet or an animal in our care, correct, an animal in our care, because
In
I
our
don't
care.
believe we own animals, but we care for animals.
Exactly. An animal in our care, both as a pet or even if it's on a farm. I know most of our viewers are vegetarian or vegan.
I know, but we target
But
everybody. so.
it's good to start understanding a bit better how animals in farms can be kept as well, because if we can reduce the welfare issues and the ethical issues to do with animals in farming, then
they would be living a better life.
they will be living a better life, because
Which is
not
what we
everyone
want
is
at the
vegan
end of
and
the
not
day.
everyone is vegetarian, so
Yes.
we can
Well,
improve the life of those animals.
We would love that to be so, but unfortunately that is not,
Yes,
that is not
yes,
as yet
I know.
possible. So I think the first freedom is that an animal should live in a suitable environment, correct?
Yes.
So what's that? What is a
Okay.
suitable environment?
What is a suitable environment? Now, to understand what a suitable environment for any animal is, you have to understand the natural environment of an animal. And here's where I'm going to mention one word that is a bit complicated. Okay? Complicated. It's unusual. You never heard it before unless you're in the circus. There is a study of animals that we call ethology. Now, ethology is a study of animals that focuses on their natural behavior, their evolution, and their biology. So from their natural behavior, you're observing them, and the only place to observe natural behavior is in their natural environment. So, by observing that natural environment, you can take the bits out of the environment that the animal uses, and you can replicate them when you're keeping
But to be a
them.
devil's advocate, how
Yes.
can I watch a chihuahua in its natural environment?
No.
Because a chihuahua has got no natural
Well,
environment.
that's interesting. You should mention that, because there is the study of ethology, dog ethology. There are many studies. Nowadays, we understand even how the dog evolved from wolf to prototype dog, and then to all different breeds, and the
And
natural.
from big to a little chihuahua, there must have been a lot
From
of
big
effort.
to medium. And
To me.
because the prototype dog, the first dogs were sort of a medium size, and then from that medium size type of dog, you get the Great Dane and the Chihuahua, and they're all. This is fascinating. There's no other species in the animal kingdom that has such huge variation. But to understand the dog, it's not enough to understand the ethology of the first dog, because Nowadays we understand that each breed evolved into a different niche. So it's that niche that you need to study for that particular animal. For example, a hunting dog evolved in the niche in which people needed a dog to bring their prize back.
Yes.
The Chihuahua evolved as a companion. Okay, and that's the niche of the Chihuahua. Okay, some people, yes, they're yappy, they warn you about, but mostly they are companion dogs. And that's, if you look at all the companion breeds,
it's a noisy bell. Some say that the Chihuahua is a noisy bell.
But the essential requirement for most companion breeds is that they're small, easy to carry around, and they don't need too much food, they don't require that much care because they don't take up that much space.
But I think this you mentioning the suitable environment is very appropriate in today's unfortunate fashion for different types of pets.
So that's where I was going with it.
In the sense, we know well what a cat needs, maybe what a dog needs.
Exactly.
Maybe we can understand what a rabbit needs. But if you've decided to have a skunk at home, I think the skunk's environment is a bit different from the living room.
You need to provide a very different environment for a skunk than you would for a similar animal, because their natural behaviors are different, and most of those natural behaviors require very specific parameters in the environment. But even though we have had cats and dogs as pets for many years, there's still a lot of misconceptions about the environment in animals. Like, for example, let's say the cat. Okay? The cat is in the middle of the food chain. It's a predator, it eats lower animals, but it also is prey. There are animals that eat it. So the cat needs safe spaces.
It depends if it's big sister like a lion or
even dogs. Even dogs are the natural predator of the cat because their natural environment overlaps. So the cat needs to feel safe. It can do that by hiding. It needs places to hide. It can do that by being in high places so it can watch what's going around. It feels safe. That's why cats like to, climb on the kitchen counter so much.
Because it gives them a bird's eye view, so to say.
Exactly.
And
they can see pretty much everywhere around them, so they can see what's coming, and if they decide they need to take action, they can. If they don't have anywhere to hide and they don't have anywhere to climb, unfortunately this can cause some stress to some cats. But also natural environment. When it comes to dogs, on the other hand, it's a different story altogether. The dog is a ground-dwelling animal, okay? And when you look at the natural behavior of dogs that are free roaming, if they can, they will dig a hole and sleep in it. Sometimes even, deep enough to be considered a den. The dog is a denning animal, so having an environment in which they actually
have... Which is why you see them scratching even when they're about to sleep, right?
Exactly. So a kennel with a roof feels safer to a dog than it does if it doesn't have it. So having a bed alone probably isn't enough. Doesn't mean everyone has to have a kennel, but like for example, it explains a lot about why dogs like to sit under tables and chairs. And we need to give them that freedom to interact with their environment if we understand their needs. And that's what the 5 freedoms is all about. It's understanding the needs of their environment, to give them what they need in their environment. But
let's look a bit though about the second one, because we're taking long.
Okay, but I just would like to mention though about the environment. There are a lot of exotic pets nowadays.
A bit too many.
A bit too many. When it comes to environment, the first things to do to check that you all have right is temperature, humidity. In the case of fish, the water parameters, for example, it's cruel to keep a fish in acidic water if it's used to alkaline water in nature. It's adapted to alkaline water, acidic water won't damage it. So these tiny things that sometimes we take a bit for granted, you think just because you have your light bulb in your vivarium, it's enough. No, it needs to be on one side so the animal can regulate its temperature by moving from one end to the other. And it needs to be able to have a temperature range. So there's a little bit more care involved in looking after these animals, a bit more care than most people are used to. And you should do your research if you have one or if you're looking to get
My
one.
personal opinion, but obviously this is mine and not is that whilst cats and dogs, rabbits, maybe even guinea pigs have been with us for a long time, exotic pets
Haven't been domesticated.
haven't been domesticated, so they haven't spent the centuries with humankind. To a certain extent, it's probably easier to have a chicken or a sheep or a pig as a pet rather than having a lizard
It's not just that. If you mention dogs and cats specifically, there is this misconception that we domesticated cats and dogs. No.
They chose to come
They
with us.
chose to creep into our habitats, and eventually they domesticated themselves. We just realized that there is an advantage to having them around. So, with the case of dogs, we selected which ones were
Cats
for this.
kept us still of a distance, even though they came close. They chose
exactly,
to keep
because the cat only ever had one job, and it still only has one job in reality, because being a pet isn't a job. The cat's job was to catch vermin. It can still do that now.
Yeah.
The same way it used to be able to do that 5,000 years ago.
Well, I think they're still thinking they're in Egyptian time when they were reincarnations of the gods as well.
Yes,
So.
yes.
So let's look at the second freedom, which is to be able to exhibit most of the traits, the natural behavioral
behaviors.
patterns, right?
Yes. Now, I decided to do this exactly after environment because, as we discussed, a lot of these natural behaviors depend on the environment. Natural behaviors, if we're talking about dogs and cats, barking is a natural behavior. You can't expect a dog never to bark.
Yes.
And for a cat, digging to go to the toilet and covering it up is a natural behavior. If it doesn't have a cat litter to dig in, that's bad. That really feels stressful for the cat because it can't hide poop, and not hiding poop for a cat means you're calling all the other predators to come and eat you. More specific though, for example.
So here, cutting the nails of a cat. Would that be removing its natural? Some might say, if I don't cut its nail off, it's going to tear all my.
Are you talking about clipping them, or are you talking about declawing? Declawing. First of all, it's illegal. Okay, and there's very good reason. It's bad. It's bad for the cat. One, yes, it means that it can't carry out that natural behavior to the full. And if you notice, in fact, declawed cats still try
to claw.
In fact, they still need to do it. For the cat, declawing isn't just about removing the nail. It removes the last bone on each finger. Okay? Now, just to give you an idea, if you try to stand without your toes, it's very difficult. It creates an imbalance in the cat. It needs to adjust its posture
Which
to
makes a
regain
bigger
some of
strain
its
then
balance.
on.
And it means it's also constantly walking on its knuckles, which is very painful. And cats that have been declawed get problems in the shoulders and the elbows very often. You're asking for trouble with toilet training as well, because getting in the litter tray becomes very painful, so cats tend to avoid it unless you change the litter, the substrate to something a bit more kind to the paws. And it's generally just bad, And why? Why when you can just clip regularly?
Talking though about the natural behavior, therefore, obviously it means that I guess one of the things is you need to have a pet according also to the space you have. So if I have a garden, it might make sense to have a type of dog or cat or possibly another type of pet. But if I live in a small apartment, probably I need to rethink the size and also the type of.
Yes, and here the size of your apartment doesn't necessarily mean the bigger the apartment, the bigger the dog, or the smaller the apartment, the smaller the dog.
Okay.
Because some small dogs need large spaces, and some big dogs need small spaces. Your typical Great Dane, although there are exceptions, your typical Great Dane is happy with the small space because all he wants to do most of the day is just sleep, right?
Yes.
Whereas one of the smallest dogs.
I guess sometimes you'd like to give a good run.
Yes, of course. They all need to stretch their legs. Off-leash exercise for most dogs is a very important thing. That's why we are trying to encourage, local councils and the government to have more dog parks and off-leash spaces for dogs. But again, a small dog, relatively, fox terrier, he'd be happy with a golf course. So apartment living for a fox terrier is a huge adaptation. But there are other natural behaviors that we tend to take a little bit for granted because I don't think we understand them so well. Like for example, how an animal needs to behave before it gives birth. The preparations it needs to make. Like digging a hole. These behaviors were inbuilt, they're genetic, you can't remove them, and the animal feels very stressed out if you can't carry them out. So sometimes that can be enough to explain why the mom eats her offspring, because she's so stressed, she knows she can't keep them safe, and her oxytocin doesn't kick in quick enough.
So basically we need to keep these in mind, obviously,
yes.
and
That's why ethology focuses on the natural behavior of an animal. How does it behave in its natural environment in those situations? Because if we can replicate those behaviors in the environment when we're bringing them in, we can do a lot to manage their welfare and improve their welfare.
Okay, so obviously this as well hits a nerve when we're talking about exotic pets as well. I mean, at the end of the day, keeping a lizard keeping a snake in an aquarium is certainly not. It's not being able to exhibit its natural behavior.
Yes, and a behavior that some people think that we should discourage is hunting behavior.
Well, animals are in humans we discourage it 100%.
Yes.
Let us state that and restate that.
But animals are animals. Again, it's an instinct, and they need to carry it out. Nowadays, research shows that if an animal is unable to perform a natural behavior that it needs to perform, you're throwing off its blood chemistry, its hormones, neurotransmitters get thrown off, and that's when you start getting emotional problems, behavior problems.
Which is also why I believe the MSPCA advocates the neutering of cats which are in the streets as well, because obviously cats are major hunters of wild birds in our gardens.
And again, that's the perfect example of how natural behavior is a need. Because even if the cat isn't hungry, if it's well fed, it will still hunt and kill.
Yeah, sometimes you see the cat bringing over a bird to say,
yes.
Look, I caught this bird.
Because hunting behavior is not dictated by hunger. It's independent. If something moves, the movement and the prey is what triggers the hunting behavior, not the hunger. Okay, so the cat needs to do it.
Well, it obviously decreases if it's well fed, but maybe if it's,
really.
hungry, it probably might trigger more.
Not really. It might eat more, yes, if it's hungrier, but not necessarily kill less.
So I think the third one is a suitable diet.
Yes, and again, it depends on the animal. So,
yes.
Another way to know what a suitable diet is for an animal is watch what it eats and why. Okay, if nowadays at least we get many pet shops that sell species-specific foods, and there's a reason why it's species-specific, because there you have 3 different types of animals. You have omnivores, herbivores, carnivores, and trying to turn a carnivore into a herbivore would be the equivalent of trying to turn a herbivore into carnivore. It's bad. If it's an omnivore, most of them can get away with eating just one food group, but the question is, does the animal want that? Because it's one thing us humans taking that decision, but forcing our philosophy on animals, I don't think it
Which is why I normally advocate people should have tortoises or rabbits, which are.
If you really want your animal to be vegan, choose.
So there is advance in pet food, which is more friendly.
There are supplements, like for example, cats. cats are what we call obligate carnivores. There is an amino acid called taurine that you can only obtain from animal products and meat, and cats need it, otherwise they can't function. The brain stops working properly.
I think the
the
difference here is, Chris, that let's say a few years ago, or let's say the dog at home would be part of the family and would eat with us, would probably finish eating, some leftover meat, a piece of bone, and would pass over there. So even if the dog was eating some meat, it is the leftover meat. I mean, even way back, I believe a lot of Maltese even had a pig at home, you know, and give that.
Nowadays, because we have pet foods, that meat comes straight from the manufacturer.
And the problem is that in most pet food, which the pet food is from statistics accounting to 30% of the animals are being bred and killed for pet food. It's no longer the waste meat which is going into the pet food industry.
And because owners are also looking for better quality foods, the ones that have chicken breast written rather than chicken meal, because chicken meal can include a bunch of stuff, but chicken breast is very specific, and the manufacturer can't put anything but chicken breast if that's what is listed. And owners are looking for that now.
So it's becoming a bit of a vicious cycle, you know, in which we need to give a chicken breast to a dog when at the end of the day traditionally the dog used to eat leftovers with us and our leftovers.
No, I mean, I don't think it's necessary. No. I know there are a lot of people out there that want to feed, you know, the raw diet, will probably disagree with me, but if you look at the ethology, again, the evolution of the dog.
The wolf came over
to eat our garbage that, you know, humans used to leave behind when we were still marauding. We used to leave food behind wherever we moved. Humans had always this nasty habit of leaving garbage wherever they went.
It seems we haven't evolved on that.
No, I don't. I think the humans stopped evolving a long time ago. But when then people discovered farming and they established themselves, only the wolves that weren't timid could move in and eat now from the garbage we were throwing out just in front of our houses. And that's how domestication started. So if you look at the evolution of the dog, their natural diet was pretty much what humans discarded, and I'm sorry to also, you know, it's disgusting, but it was also our feces, our drainage, you know, it's still got protein in it, it's a food source for a dog, and that's why some of them still do try to eat it.
So I think there's a balance here that we have to be understanding of. Okay.
The last thing I'd like to mention about the suitable diet is it's not just species specific. There are different life stages in the animal. You know, the puppy is born drinking milk. Mommy knows exactly how soon and when to finish weaning the puppy. There's formulations specific for puppies, and there's a reason for that. There's formulations for adults, and there's formulations for senior animals, because your nutritional needs change as you grow older. It's the same with us.
Yes, it's like, you know, the argument why people don't need to drink milk, because the milk is a cow milk and we're not a cow. So at the end of the day,
you know, nature only creates milk for the immature animal because it's high in calcium. The animal still needs to build a lot of bones. There's other nutrients there that also help develop neurological function, and it has the part of the immunity from the mother to pass on to its offspring. Okay. Once the animal doesn't need it anymore, the mother starts producing it. So even nature is telling you, you know, and then it's an interesting one. The way wolves wean their cubs is while mommy is trying to reduce the amount of milk they get, when they start going out, mommy comes back from the hunt, and the first thing they do is lick her chin, and that causes her to regurgitate some of the food.
Okay.
So that's how basically wolves wean their pups. Dogs, some of them still retain this, but not all of them. But we suspect nowadays that that's where this greeting behavior that dogs have, you know, when you come back and they want to jump at your face and lick you, that's where it comes from. So don't take it too bad if your dog does that. If they do that, it means they like you and they welcome you back.
Mentioning though a suitable diet comes into mind. We used to say that the dog is similar to its carer.
Right.
And I think this probably comes from the diet, because we used to, if I eat bad food, if I'm lazy and I don't take care, and we don't go out for walks, probably we're both going to become a bit fat.
I suppose.
But if I eat well, the dog eats well, and we all go for walks, probably, the suitable diet also is not just the diet, but it's the lifestyle.
Yeah, that's true. However, I'm sorry, I'm guilty of it too. My dogs eat better food than I do. I suppose that may be where it came from, yeah.
So the fourth freedom is protection from pain, suffering, and diseases.
Okay, so
it's a very, very important thing.
Yes, this is generally the one that most people get right, because it's straightforward. We all understand pain. We all understand suffering, injury, and disease. When you're animal.
But wouldn't you consider suffering maybe as loneliness?
Sometimes yes. Like I would classify, most. Screw that. All punishment techniques for training as unnecessary suffering. There are better techniques we know of nowadays. Reward-based training. It doesn't have to be treats. It can be toys. It can be natural rewards, such as a game.
MSPCA used to promote with dogs just the clicker.
Yes, precisely. Right? The clicker is just an easy signal to tell the dog, yes, you've done something right.
I remember
or the cat,
I remember when it was launched. Someone had said, you can even use it with your kids if you want.
Yes,
and
I remember.
I was tempted, but today with
No. Actually, there's a fun game I do sometimes in schools when I do the visits, the educational visits, and I remember this one classroom. If you're watching us, hi again. But I had trained this whole classroom to sit down whenever I said the word banana, by never really telling them that that's what I wanted, but using a clicker. So it works on humans, it works on cats and dogs. Some people have trained chickens with it. The sky's the limit when it comes to reward-based training.
Let's though obviously yes,
the
protection from pain and suffering.
Freedom from pain, injury, and disease is mostly, I would say, please make friends with your vet. Please make sure that you take your animal to a vet visit at least once a year if you have an animal that has a chronic problem.
Now, obviously, dogs are no longer allowed to be on constant leashes, right?
Right.
But
that's suffering, isn't it?
Yes, that was suffering.
Because what a lot of people would ask. But if the collar is not digging into the dog's neck, why is leashing them constantly so bad? But picture this: you're in a room with a big window like this one. You can't see it, but we can.
Yes.
But you're never allowed out.
We need to remind everybody we are in the MSPCA charity shop in Mostar, which is overlooking Constitution Street. We have a big window here with the shop behind us. So yes, we're like this dog here who's looking at all the time.
And we're remnant from the RSPCA days.
Yes.
So picture if you're in a room with a big window, you're watching everything going on in the world, but you can't interact with it. That causes a lot of frustration, and in many dogs, that frustration becomes a chronic stress problem. And chronic frustration can turn into rage as well. And unfortunately, what's happened, because recently we've had this law that says you can't keep your dog chained anymore, which is great. We think it's great that dogs can't be chained anymore. Unfortunately, what happened is, because the microchipping of dogs wasn't enforced before that, the ones that
were cut
loose nowadays, a dog that's used to being chained, all this sudden freedom, with all this frustration built up into rage, it's no surprise yes, that they started killing other animals. They never came back. This could have been done in a better way. Most of
But
the time
unfortunately, I think to a certain extent, whether we like legislation or not, in some cases, some people never change unless
yes,
the law changes.
indeed. They've had 2 years warning
So
that
you know,
this was coming. So I don't think there's really any excuse, but
so let's look at the last freedom:
the last freedom.
to be housed with or without other animals.
Yes, very important. One which humans this is the one I think they mistake the most, because we are a social species. We are used to living
With others.
with others. We do better when we live with others. We kind of depend.
Well, not all of us, but most of us.
Yes, most of us. We do better generally around humans. We kind of depend on each other anyway. Even though I'm the solitary kind of person. I like living alone. But
With your dogs.
With my dogs, yes. But I still depend on other people. I go buying stuff, and I need to work with people, and so it's a change. And we tend to assume that just because we are social animals, that every other animal is social.
It's going to be socially.
And it's not the case. Dogs, yes, they evolved from a social animal, although their evolution sort of drove them a little bit apart. They still kind of need that social stimulation. Some breeds less than others, and some breeds more than others.
But even in the case of dogs, if you know, domestic dogs that are let wild end up in packs, so
Yes.
they do have a tendency to go back into.
Yes, but then you don't find dogs in the wild. You find feral dogs, but they
Yes.
always live in association with humans. They always
Yeah.
depend on food that humans can
There you
provide.
are. Come on.
He's making friends with you.
Yes.
Yeah, just because I'm saying that because generally Champ tends to bark
At me.
Daryl. Yes, so this is improvement.
Improvement today.
But back on the topic of like whether an animal is social or not, Weimaraners, for example, are known for their separation panic. You know, they bond with a person so much that you know, as soon as that person walks out of the room, it's like you've removed all the oxygen from the air. They suffer a lot. So if you're getting a Weimaraner, please be prepared that this dog is going to have to be at your heel all the time. And some people don't like that. Some people really like that. So different dogs.
Different
Good for
dogs,
different people.
different choices.
Different choices. But if you look at another common pet, which is the cat, yes, domestication is still a work in progress. So you'll find cats that really
I don't
are
think they'll change
social.
much.
But you
this
find
rate.
there's a wide spectrum. So you find cats that like being with other cats, and they kind of depend on being with other cats and with other humans. And that there are, you know, at the other extreme of the spectrum, you have the cats that don't want to be touched, don't want any other cats around them. They don't want dogs. They don't want nothing. You know, they just want to eat and sleep and interact with their environment and be left alone. And we have to respect that. So with cats, it's especially difficult challenge because you really don't know what you're going to get until they're about 4 to 5 months old when genetics kick in. So this is why I would say if you really want a cat, get an adult because that way you know what you're getting. But then when it comes to other animals, again, we tend to get it a bit wrong. Like for example, you know, mice are mostly a social species, and most people keep mice alone. On their own. Horses. Also, horses are stable alone. They're a social animal.
We have rabbits.
Rabbits. Although rabbits are they're not obligated social.
You can have if you want a small pet, you can have a tortoise, and they're not really very sociable, but you know, you can get it to become a bit.
Exactly. But it's you know, it's amazing that we tend to sort of reverse the way, you know, at the kennels, most places that you find dogs in kennels, there's one when there really should be 2 or 3, right? But on the other hand,
cat people
have many when you really shouldn't have more than 2 or 3 together.
Yes.
So it's an important thing to understand, because it's not just about, you know, how much space and food you can provide for them. You know, every animal has its own idea. It's not something you can dictate. The animal has its own idea of how much territory they need, that will provide enough food for them, enough places to hide for them, and, you know, enough places to go to the toilet. So, you know, you can't really you can't change genetics. Genetics is, you know,
I think this comes
genetics away.
we're close to the end, but this comes to a very interesting part. When you are, I mean, because a number of people today buy a dog or buy a cat, which is from either from a breeder or whatever. But if you want to remove a lot of this uncertainty which you're mentioning, probably your best bet is to go to a sanctuary or a rehoming center like MSPCA, where you will have a dog or a cat which is slightly older, and therefore the character has already been somewhat identified, which I believe part of the work that you do and the colleagues at the rehoming center is to identify the character and also advise.
It's matchmaking.
Matchmaking.
It's matchmaking. It's exactly like that. We have a profile for the dog, and when you come in to adopt an animal, we build a profile for you. And, you know, when we managed to find two profiles that fit together.
A dating profile.
It's a dating profile. It's exactly that. Just like I said last time. It's like you're trying to find the person you want to marry.
So it is suggested that, you know, it probably makes sense to one, it doesn't, I believe it's not good to get a very young dog, right? Because the dog.
Well, you're not legally. You're not supposed to separate from the mom until the puppy or kitten is at least 8 weeks old, because there's a natural process when it comes to weaning. The mother needs to teach them a few other lessons like coping with frustration and fear. So that's important. When you want to adopt, we've spent time with these animals, and
you are seeing some of the animals which are open for adoption whilst we're talking.
Yes.
as
and that's another advantage of adopting from a sanctuary and an adult dog, because when you're adopting an adult dog, when you're taking it from, those people have actually spent time with the animal, and they can tell you stuff about it. You know, the animal, the puppy on the other hand, or the kitten, that's still a work in progress. And if you take it home, it's basically an open book. You can write on it, and I'm sorry, if you don't put the time into it to write the good story, what you end up is a problem, a big problem. That's part of my work at Behaviour, and I'm doing a lot of the damage that has been done in the first few weeks of life.
Okay, so I believe, again, as always, we recommend and we advise people to come over to MSPCA or any other sanctuaries, because there are a number of other sanctuaries which have cats and dogs. So please, if you want to choose to adopt a shelter dog. Furthermore, as I mentioned earlier on, we are at Mosta. MSPCA has 2 charity shops now, one in Slima, which is on the road of Kappa Hospital.
3.
Yes. We have this one here in Mosta, which is
just in case you have a difficulty finding it, it's the same shop that Hobby World used to be.
Yes, and it's in front of Iceland. In Mosta. And finally, we have the warehouse, which is in Nashar. There's the warehouse where there is furniture and bigger stuff, so to say.
Oh, it's a treasure trove of things you've never seen before.
Again, welcome. A number of people should come here. A lot of books, lots of clothes, lots of everything.
Yes.
So thank you for being with us. Thank you, Chris. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.